"Keep the cow," he said. "Take the house." Cecilia Delaney stood at the edge of his front porch with frost on her shawl and her last milk cow tied to a fence post behind her. November had turned the valley white. The animal's breath rose in clouds. Cecilia's rose slower. She had rehearsed this offer for 3 days, had practiced saying it without her voice breaking, and now Clement Merrick was refusing the only thing she had left to trade. She was 38 years old and had buried a husband, lost a homestead, and watched the last of her bees die in a wet spring that rotted the hives from the inside. The candles she sold at market had kept her through summer. Barely. But winter in Sweetwater Bend did not care what a woman had survived. Winter only asked what she had left. And she had a cow, one cow, a bony Jersey with a cracked horn and a stubborn disposition. That was all. Increase Hollingsworth at the supply store had called in her father's old account the week before. $43 and a threat. He would not extend her credit for coal, would not sell her feed, would not even look at her when he said it, just kept his eyes on the ledger like he was reading a death sentence he had not written himself. She had gone to the boarding house first, then to the widow Kearns, then to the Presbyterian deacon who had once called her industrious. Each door closed the same way, gently, with apologies, with the quiet arithmetic of a woman past marrying age who had nothing to recommend her but calloused hands and a reputation for keeping to herself. Clement Merrick was the last name on her list, a rancher, quiet, unreadable. She had seen him in town buying nails and salt and speaking to no one. She had heard he lived alone in a house too large for one man. She had heard other things, too, that he had been engaged once, that the woman had gone east and never come back, that he did not discuss it. She did not know him, but she had walked 4 miles through snow to stand on his porch and offer him the only leverage she had, and he had said no. Not to her, to the trade. "Keep the cow," he said again. His voice was low and unhurried. "Take the house. I have a cabin out past the south pasture. I will stay there until spring." The wind moved through the bare cottonwoods. The cow shifted her weight. Cecilia did not move at all. 3 weeks earlier, before the first hard frost, Cecilia Delaney had stood in the center aisle of the Sweetwater Bend General Store and counted her coins twice. The second count came up the same as the first, 17 cents. She needed lamp oil. She needed salt. She needed a single pound of flour to stretch the last of her provisions through the week. The flour alone was 14 cents. The oil was 12. The salt was 8. 34 cents for the barest requirements of survival. She had 17. Increase. Hollingsworth watched her from behind the counter. He did not offer help, did not suggest alternatives, just watched with his ledger open beside him and his pen resting across it like a blade laid flat. She put the flour on the counter. Only the flour. "That will be 14 cents, he said, "and there is the matter of your father's account." Her father had been dead 11 years. She had not known there was an account. $43, Hollingsworth said. "Accumulated interest. I have been patient, but winter is coming, and I will need to settle my own books." Cecilia looked at the flour, at the 14 cents in her palm, at the man who had just told her she owed more money than she had seen in 2 years combined. She set 13 cents on the counter and walked out with nothing. The door closed behind her. She did not cry. Crying required an energy she had stopped being able to afford somewhere around the 3rd year of her widowhood, when she realized that grief was a luxury and survival was a job that did not pay. She was 38 years old. In Sweetwater Bend, that meant something specific. It meant the young men at church looked through her. It meant the married women included her in their charity baskets, but not their kitchen tables. It meant the word spinster had started attaching itself to her name in town conversation, even though she had been married once, even though she had buried a husband and kept his land and worked it alone until the bank took it back. None of that mattered. What mattered was that she was a woman without a man, without children, without property, without the particular kind of beauty that made people forget the absence of everything else. She sold candles, beeswax tapers she made from the honey of hives that had died 2 springs ago. She had stored enough wax to last a year, maybe 2 if she was careful. But wax did not pay debts. Wax did not keep a woman warm when the snow came down and the woodpile ran out, and the only man willing to sell her fuel decided he would rather watch her freeze. The first Sunday of November, she went to church. She sat in the back pew. She wore her cleanest dress, which was also her only dress that did not show the patches. She sang the hymns from memory because she could not afford a hymnal, and the one she had borrowed last year had been quietly reclaimed by the deacon's wife. After the service, the congregation gathered in the yard. Cecilia stood at the edge of the group, not quite inside it, not quite outside. The particular geography of a woman who had once belonged and now did not. The widow Kearns approached her with a look of practiced sympathy. "I heard about the account," she said. "At Hollingsworth's, word traveled fast in Sweetwater Bend, especially word about failure." Cecilia said nothing. "If you need a place to stay," the widow continued, "I have a room, but I would need help with the cleaning and the cooking, and of course there would be the matter of rent." Cecilia understood. The widow was not offering shelter. She was offering employment dressed as charity, with terms that would leave Cecilia owing more than she earned. "Thank you," Cecilia said. "I will manage." The widow's face tightened. The particular tightening of a woman who had extended what she considered generosity and received something other than gratitude. "Pride is a cold bedfellow," she said, and walked away. Cecilia stood alone in the churchyard. The November wind pulled at her shawl. The congregation dispersed in clusters of 2 and 3 and 4, moving toward warm houses and Sunday dinners and lives that included other people. She turned to leave, and that was when she saw him. Clement Merrick stood beside his horse at the edge of the yard. He was not part of any cluster, was not speaking to anyone, just standing with one hand on the horse's neck, watching the crowd thin out. He was 43 years old, tall, weathered in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with years spent working land alone. His hat was pulled low. His coat was heavy wool, patched at one elbow but well made underneath the repair. He looked like a man who had money once and had decided not to replace the things that still worked. Cecilia had seen him before, at market, at the feed store, once at the bank, signing papers she could not read from across the room. He never spoke to her, never acknowledged her. But she had noticed, in the particular way a woman notices a man who seems not to notice anyone, that he carried himself like someone waiting for something that was not going to arrive. She did not know what that meant. She did not need to know. She turned to walk home. "Miss Delaney." His voice was low, unhurried, the voice of a man who did not raise it because he had never needed to. She stopped. He crossed the yard toward her, not quickly, just steadily. The horse followed without being led, the reins loose in his hand. When he reached her, he did not speak immediately, just stood there for a moment, looking at her with an expression she could not read. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. "Flour," he said, "and salt. I was at Hollingsworth's this morning, saw what he left on the counter after you walked out." She looked at the bag, at his hand holding it, at the calluses across his knuckles and the quiet way he stood, not offering the bag so much as simply holding it where she could reach it if she chose. "I cannot pay for that," she said. "I did not ask you to." The wind moved between them, cold and steady. "Why?" she said. He did not answer, just set the bag on the fence post beside her and walked back to his horse. She watched him mount, watched him turn the animal toward the road that led south, past the last farms, into the open country where the ranches spread out like lonely kingdoms. He did not look back. She took the bag. She moved into his house the next morning. It felt like trespassing. The front room was clean, but unlived in. The furniture arranged by someone who had stopped expecting company. A table with 2 chairs. A stove that drew well. A window that faced south, toward the pasture, toward the cabin she could not see from here, but knew was there. He had left before dawn. She found the note on the table, written in a hand that slanted hard to the right. Wood is stacked on the east side. Well is 30 yards past the barn. Do not go out after dark without a lantern. No signature, no explanation, just instructions. She stood in the center of his kitchen and did not know what to do with her hands. The cow settled into the barn like she had always lived there. Cecilia milked her that first morning in a building warmer than any she had used in 3 years. The hay was dry. The stalls were clean. The roofie did not leak. Another small thing she noticed. The second day, she found fresh wood stacked beside the door. She had not heard him come, had not heard the axe. But the pile was there, split clean and stacked tight, and when she looked out across the snow, she could see the tracks leading south. 1 set of boot prints, 1 set coming, 1 set going. She did not see him that day, or the next, but each morning the woodpile grew. On the 4th day, she left a candle on the porch railing. Beeswax. The last of her good ones, the ones she had been saving for market. She set it where he would see it and went back inside. That evening, the candle was gone. In its place, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it in the kitchen. Coffee. Real coffee. Enough for a week. She had not tasted coffee in 7 months. The ritual established itself without either of them naming it. He came before dawn. She heard him sometimes, if she woke early enough, if she lay still in the bed that was not hers, and listened for the sound of the axe. Split, silence, split, silence, a rhythm like breathing. By the time she rose, he was gone. But something was always left behind. Wood, a sack of oats for the cow, once a jar of honey with no note attached. She left candles, 2 at first, then 3, then a whole bundle wrapped in string. He took them, left nothing extra that week. She wondered if she had given too much, if she had miscalculated the economy of this exchange, if he would stop coming now that she had made it uneven. But the next morning the woodpile grew again. November deepened. The snow came steady now, not the light dustings of early winter, but the heavy falls that buried fence posts and made the road to town impassable for days at a time. Cecilia did not go to town. She did not want to see Increase Hollingsworth, did not want to walk past the supply store and feel his eyes on her through the window, did not want to answer the questions that would come if anyone learned where she was staying, a woman alone in a man's house, even with the man a mile away in a cabin, even with nothing improper, even with the truth being exactly what it was, which was a stranger's inexplicable kindness and a widow's desperate need. Sweetwater Bend would not care about the truth. The second week she saw him. She had gone to the well at mid-morning. The bucket was heavy, the path slick with ice, and she was concentrating so hard on her footing that she did not notice him until she was 10 feet away. He stood at the edge of the barn, mending a hinge that had been hanging loose since she arrived. His coat was open. His sleeves were rolled despite the cold. She could see the cords of muscle in his forearms, the way he held the hammer like it weighed nothing. He looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he set down the hammer and walked toward her. Not quickly, just steadily. the way he did everything. "Let me," he said. He took the bucket from her hands. Their fingers did not touch. Almost, but not quite. He carried the water to the house, set it inside the door, walked back to the barn without another word. She stood on the porch and watched him finish the hinge. Another small thing she noticed, the way he worked. Patient, thorough, no wasted motion. Every swing of the hammer deliberate, every adjustment precise. He worked like a man who had learned that rushing only meant doing the job twice. She went inside, closed the door, leaned against it for a long moment. Her heart was steady. That surprised her. She had expected it to race, had expected the particular flutter of proximity that she remembered from years ago, from a time when she was young enough to believe that such things still happened to women like her. But there was no flutter, only a quiet settling, like coming in from cold. December arrived with a storm that lasted 3 days. She did not hear the axe, did not see tracks in the snow. The woodpile had been stacked high before the storm came, high enough to last a week, and she understood that he had known, had prepared. On the second day of the storm, she found herself standing at the window, looking south toward the cabin she could not see. The snow came down in sheets, the wind howled, and somewhere out there, a mile away, a man was sitting alone in a building smaller than the one he had given her. She did not know why that thought stayed with her, did not know why she kept returning to the window, kept looking at the white, nothing beyond the glass, kept wondering if his stove drew as well as this one. The storm broke on the third morning. She went outside before dawn. The sky was clear. The stars were still visible, and there, cutting a path through the fresh snow, was a single set of boot prints. He had come in the night. During the storm, the woodpile had grown by 4 logs. She stood in the cold and looked at those tracks for a long time. The church in Sweetwater Bend had a new bell. Cecilia had heard it on Sundays, ringing out across the valley, calling the faithful to worship. She had assumed the congregation had raised the money, had assumed some wealthy family in town had made a donation, the way wealthy families did when they wanted their names carved into brass plaques. But standing in his kitchen, opening a drawer to find a clean cloth, she found instead a receipt for the bell, for the church, for an amount that made her breath stop, and at the bottom, in that same hard, slanting hand, a single notation, anonymous. Another small thing she noticed. She closed the drawer, did not mention it, did not mention the second receipt she found a week later, folded into a book on the shelf. The school, the teacher's salary, a year's worth of chalk and slates and primers. All of it paid by a man who lived alone in a cabin and split wood for a widow he barely knew. By the middle of December, the ritual had shifted. He stayed longer now. Not much. 5 minutes. 10. Long enough to check the stove. Long enough to ask if the cow was eating. Long enough to stand in the kitchen doorway with his hat in his hands and say nothing at all while she poured water into the kettle. She started leaving coffee ready, a cup on the table, steam rising. The first time he hesitated. "You do not have to," he said. "I know." He sat, drank the coffee, did not speak. She did not speak either. It was enough. Christmas came. She woke to find a package on the porch, a wool blanket, blue, the kind that cost more than she had earned in the last 6 months combined. She wrapped it around her shoulders and stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the valley. Somewhere south, in a cabin past the pasture, a man was waking up alone. She did not know his story, not all of it, but she had pieced together fragments. The engagement he did not discuss, the woman who had gone east, the years of solitude that followed, years spent building something that no one else would ever share. She knew what that was like, the particular loneliness of having once expected a different life, the way it settled into the bones like cold, became part of the structure, became something you stopped noticing because noticing it did not help. She was 38 years old. He was 43, old enough to stop pretending, old enough to recognize what was real. The morning after Christmas, she left him the last of her candles, all of them, every one she had made from the wax of hives that had died 2 springs ago. That evening, she found a note on the table. New Year's social at the Grange Hall. Will you come? Not a question exactly. The period at the end made it something else. A statement, an offering. She read it 3 times. Set it on the table. Picked it up again. In the drawer beneath the receipts, she had found something else. A letter. Old. Creased from folding and refolding. The handwriting was feminine, slanted left instead of right. She had not read it, had put it back exactly where she found it. But she had seen the postmark, Boston, and she had seen the date, 11 years ago, the same year her father died. The same year she had stood in a Boston workhouse with a number stitched into her collar instead of a name, learning what it meant to be nothing. Another small thing she noticed, the particular shape of loss, the way it looked the same whether it was a woman leaving a man or a man leaving the world, the empty space it carved. She picked up the note. Read it one more time. New Year's social at the Grange Hall. Will you come? She did not have a dress that did not show patches, did not have shoes that did not let in snow, did not have anything to offer except a reputation already ruined by proximity and a skill that no one in Sweetwater Bend knew she possessed. A circuit judge had boarded with her family one winter, years ago, before her father's debts and her mother's death and all the other disasters that followed. He had taught her to read legal filings, deeds, contracts, the particular language of claims and counterclaims. She had been good at it, better than good. No one had ever asked her to use it. She set the note down, looked out the window at the snow. January 1st, 2 days away. She would need to find something to wear, would need to walk 4 miles to town in winter, would need to stand in a room full of people who had watched her fail and smile like she belonged there. Or she could stay, here, alone, safe. She looked at the blue blanket wrapped around her shoulders, at the coffee cooling on the table, at the woodpile outside, stacked high enough to last until spring. She had spent 3 years learning how to survive alone. Maybe it was time to learn something else. The notice appeared on the first day of the new year. Cecilia saw it when she walked into town for the social, nailed to the post outside the general store. Her name in black ink. The amount beside it, $86. She stopped, read it again. The number had doubled. Below the sum, in Hollingsworth's careful script, an explanation. Accumulated interest, storage fees, a line item for account maintenance that had never existed before, and at the bottom, a date. The debt was due in full by the 1st of February. 4 weeks, $86. She did not have 86 cents. The Grange Hall stood 50 yards away. She could hear the fiddle from here, could see the light spilling from the windows, the shadows of people moving inside. She did not go in. She walked back, 4 miles through snow that had started falling again. By the time she reached the house, her shoes were soaked through, and her hands had stopped shaking from cold and started shaking from something else. The next morning, she found a second notice. This one had been slipped under the door, official-looking, a county seal at the top, a surveyor's name she did not recognize, language about boundary disputes and unresolved claims, and the necessity of examining all deeds pertaining to the property in question, not her property. She did not have property, his. She read the notice 3 times. The 4th time she noticed the date at the bottom. The ink was darker there. The 7 looked wrong. The tail curled left instead of right, as if someone had written a to first and then added to it. She knew what a forged document looked like. The circuit judge had shown her, years ago, in a different life, the way the ink pooled when someone wrote over existing numbers, the way the paper fiber lifted slightly under correction. This was not official. This was Hollingsworth. She folded the notice, put it in her pocket, and understood, with the particular clarity of a woman who had survived too much to be surprised by cruelty, exactly what was happening. He wanted her gone, not just from town, from the valley, from Clement Merrick's life, and he was willing to threaten the one man who had helped her in order to make it happen. The gossip reached her 2 days later. She had gone to the well. The path was icy. She was concentrating on her footing when she heard voices. 2 women, walking the road that passed the south pasture. Their words carried in the cold air, living in his house, shameless, and him just letting her stay like she belongs there. A pause. Then the other voice. I heard he paid her debt at the store, the whole thing. And now Hollingsworth says there is more she owes, and Merrick will have to pay that too, if he wants to keep her. Cecilia stood very still. The bucket hung from her hand. The water inside had started to ice over at the edges. She is using him. That is what people are saying. A woman her age, no prospects, no family. What else would she be doing there? The voices faded. The women passed. Cecilia set down the bucket, walked back to the house, closed the door behind her. She sat at the table for a long time. The coffee was cold. The fire needed tending. Outside, the sun was setting, and the light through the window turned everything the color of bruises. She thought about the bell, the school, the receipts in the drawer, the man who gave without asking for recognition and received gossip in return. She thought about Boston, the workhouse, the number on her collar, the years she had spent climbing out of that particular hole only to fall into another one shaped exactly the same. She thought about his face when he asked if she would come to the social, the way his voice had sounded, not hopeful exactly, just open, like a door left unlocked. She had not gone. He would have noticed. The next morning she left before dawn. She packed her things, the blanket he had given her, the candles she had left, the dress that showed patches, and the shoes that let in snow. Everything she owned fit into a single bundle. She walked south, toward the cabin, toward him. He was outside when she arrived, splitting wood in the gray light. The axe fell, rose, fell again. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she set the bundle on the ground, the blanket on top of it. I cannot stay, she said. I am sorry. His face did not change, but something behind it shifted, something closed. The notice on your land, she said. The surveyor's claim. That is Hollingsworth. He forged the date. I can see it in the ink. He wants me gone, and he is willing to take you down to do it. She watched him process this, watched the understanding move through him like weather. I have survived worse than gossip, he said, but you should not have to. She picked up the bundle, left the blanket on the ground. He did not move to stop her, did not reach for her. Just stood there with the axe in his hands and the cold settling between them. Thank you, she said, for everything. She walked away, did not look back. The snow was falling again, and by the time she reached the road, she could not see his cabin anymore. She had nowhere to go. 4 miles to town and a posted debt she could not pay. A reputation ruined by kindness. A man she was leaving to protect from herself. January 2nd, 29 days until the debt came due. The storm caught her 2 miles from town. She had felt it building, the pressure in her ears, the way the light turned flat and gray, the particular stillness that came before the wind. But she kept walking, because stopping meant admitting she had nowhere to stop, because turning back meant facing what she had just walked away from, because Cecilia Delaney had spent 38 years learning that forward was the only direction that did not require explanation. The first gust nearly knocked her down. She staggered, caught herself on a fence post. The snow came horizontal now, driving into her face with a force that felt personal. She could not see the road, could not see the fence, could not see anything except white. She pressed forward. One step, another. The bundle in her arms grew heavier with ice. Her shoes had stopped feeling cold, which meant they had stopped feeling anything, which meant she was in trouble. She kept walking. The shape appeared out of the white like something imagined. A horse, a man on it, moving toward her with the slow certainty of someone who knew exactly where he was going. Clement. He did not speak, just reached down and pulled her up behind him. She did not resist, could not have if she wanted to. Her hands would not close properly. Her legs would not hold her weight. He turned the horse south, toward the cabin, toward the place she had just left. The storm swallowed them both. She did not remember arriving, did not remember him carrying her inside, did not remember the moment when the cold stopped being a wall and became a memory. She remembered the fire, the way it crackled and spit, the way the light moved across the low ceiling of the cabin. She remembered his hands on her shoes, pulling them off, setting them near the stove to dry. She remembered the blanket, the blue one, the one she had left on the ground outside his door. He wrapped it around her shoulders. "Drink this," he said. "Coffee, hot." The cup pressed into her hands. She drank. The warmth moved through her in slow waves, reaching her fingers last. He sat across from her, not close, not far, just present. The storm howled outside. The walls of the cabin shook but held. "You came back for the blanket," she said. He did not answer. "You saw me leave it, and you came to get it." And then the storm. He looked at her. His face was unreadable in the firelight. "I came for you," he said. The words landed without ceremony. Plain, simple, the way he did everything. She looked at the cup in her hands, at the steam rising from it, at the way the fire made shadows on the rough-hewn floor. "I cannot stay," she said again. "The things they are saying about you, about us. Hollingsworth will use it. He will. Let him. You do not understand." She set the cup down. Her hands were shaking, and it was not from cold anymore. "I have been through this before. I have seen what happens when a man's reputation gets tied to a woman who has nothing to offer. I have seen the way it poisons everything it touches." He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled between them. Then he stood, walked to a shelf in the corner, came back with something in his hands. A letter, old, creased from folding and refolding, the same letter she had found in the drawer and not read. He set it on the table between them. Her name was Catherine, he said. "We were engaged for 2 years. She left for Boston 11 years ago, said she wanted to see something bigger than this valley before she settled for the rest of her life." Cecilia looked at the letter, at the feminine handwriting slanting left. "She never came back," he said. "Married someone else. A banker. Has a house on Beacon Hill now, or so I have heard." He sat down again. The chair creaked under his weight. "I spent 5 years waiting for her to change her mind. Another 5 learning not to. And then I stopped counting. Stopped expecting anything except the land and the work and the particular kind of quiet that comes from being alone. So long you forget what it sounds like to hear another voice in your house." The fire popped. A log shifted. "And then you came," he said, "standing on my porch with frost on your shawl and a cow you were willing to trade for a corner indoors. And I thought—" He paused. The firelight moved across his face. "I thought maybe I had been wrong about being finished." Cecilia did not speak, could not speak. The words sat between them like something fragile. "The notice you found," he said. "The forged surveyor's claim. How did you know the date was altered?" She looked at her hands, at the calluses, at the years written there. "A circuit judge boarded with my family one winter, before my father's debts, before everything else. He taught me to read legal filings, deeds, contracts, the way claims are structured and the ways they can be falsified." She paused. "I was good at it, better than good, but no one has ever asked me to use it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes level with hers. "Show me," he said. She looked at him, at the steadiness in his face, at the complete absence of judgment. "You want me to show you how I can tell a document is forged. I want you to show me everything you know." The storm raged outside. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. She pulled the notice from her pocket, the one Hollingsworth had slipped under the door. She smoothed it flat on the table between them. "Here," she said, "and here, the 7 in the date. See how the ink pools at the curve. Someone wrote a 2 first, and then added the vertical stroke. The paper fiber is lifted where the pen pressed down twice." He looked where she pointed, nodded slowly. "And here," she continued, "the county seal. It is the right design, but the spacing is wrong. Official documents have exactly 3 millimeters between the eagle's wing and the border. This has 4. Someone traced it by hand. Another small thing she noticed, the way he listened. Not like a man humoring a woman, like a man learning something he needed to know. She showed him more. The signature that did not match the name. The paperweight that was wrong for county stock. The ink that was too fresh for a document supposedly filed 6 months ago. When she finished, he sat back. The firelight had shifted. The storm outside had quieted to a steady howl. "Hollingsworth does not know. You can read these," he said. "No one knows." He looked at her for a long moment, something in his face that she could not name. Then he stood, walked to the shelf again, came back with a piece of paper and a pencil. "Write it down," he said. "Everything you just showed me, every detail. Why?" "Because the New Year's social is not the only gathering this month. The Grange Hall has a meeting in 3 weeks. The whole valley attends. And Hollingsworth will be there with his ledger and his false claims and his certainty that no one can challenge him." He set the paper in front of her. "Save me a seat." The Grange Hall was full. Cecilia stood at the back, the same position she had taken at church, the particular geography of a woman uncertain of her welcome. 3 weeks had passed since the storm. 3 weeks of something she did not have a name for. Mornings in the cabin, evenings by the fire, the slow accumulation of hours spent in the same room with a man who asked nothing and offered everything. She had written it down, every detail, every inconsistency in Hollingsworth's documents, every forgery she could prove. The paper was folded in her pocket now, worn soft from handling. Clement stood near the front. He had arrived early. Saved a seat beside him. She had not taken it. Not yet. Hollingsworth called the meeting to order. His voice carried the particular authority of a man who had never been challenged. He stood behind the long table at the front, his ledger open, his pen ready. "The matter of outstanding debts," he said. "Several accounts have come due. The community deserves to know who can be trusted and who cannot." He read names, amounts. The congregation shifted in their seats. Some looked down, some looked away. Then he reached her name. Cecilia Delaney, $86, due February 1st, unpaid. The room turned toward her, dozens of faces, some curious, some pitying, some already calculating how her failure would affect them. She did not move. Hollingsworth continued, "There is also the matter of property claims in the South Valley, irregularities in the surveyor's records, questions about deed authenticity that must be resolved before spring planting." He pulled out the forged notice, the one she had analyzed by firelight, the one with the wrong date and the traced seal and the ink that pooled where it should not. "This document," he said, "raises concerns about the Merrick property, boundary disputes that may require." "Miss Delaney." The voice came from the left side of the hall. An older man, white-haired, stooped with age. Cecilia recognized him. Thomas Fairweather. He had been the county clerk for 30 years before his eyes gave out. "Miss Delaney," he said again, "I understand you have some knowledge of legal filings." The room went quiet, a different kind of quiet than before. Cecilia looked at the old clerk, at the way he was watching her. Patient, expectant. She looked at Clement. He gave no sign, just waited. She walked forward. The crowd parted, not dramatically, just enough. The particular shifting of people making room for something they did not understand yet. She reached the front table. Hollingsworth stood on one side. She stood on the other. "May I see the document?" she said. Hollingsworth hesitated. His hand tightened on the paper. "This is a county matter," he said, "not a concern for. Let her see it, Thomas." The voice came from the back now. The widow Kearns, standing with her arms crossed and her face set in an expression Cecilia had never seen before. The old clerk nodded. "Hollingsworth, let her see it." The paper changed hands. Cecilia smoothed it flat on the table. The whole room was watching now. She pointed to the date. "Here. The 7 was originally a 2. The ink pooled when someone added the vertical stroke. You can see where the paper fiber lifted." She pointed to the seal. "Here. The spacing between the eagle's wing and the border is 4 millimeters. Official county documents use 3. This was traced by hand." She pointed to the signature. "Here. The name reads William Carver, but Mr. Carver signs with a loop on the W. This signature has none." The room was silent. Thomas Fairweather leaned forward. His old eyes squinted at the paper. "She is right," he said. "I trained William Carver myself." "That is not his hand." The silence deepened. The particular silence of a community recalculating what it knew. Agnes Whitmore spoke next. She sat 3 rows back. A farmer's wife, practical, unimpressed by drama. "I saw her weather records once," she said, "years ago, when she was still keeping bees. Most detailed I have ever seen. Every rainfall, every frost date, every bloom time. She knew her land better than anyone in this valley." Another voice, Samuel Orr, the blacksmith. "She made candles for my wife when the store would not sell to her, did not ask for payment, just left them on the porch." Another, Martha Clemens. "She helped my mother sort her papers after my father died. Spent 3 days at her kitchen table. Would not take a cent." The voices accumulated, one after another. Small acts of kindness that Cecilia had forgotten. Small moments of competence that she had dismissed as ordinary. She stood at the front of the room and listened to people describe a woman she almost did not recognize. A woman who kept careful records, who helped without asking, who survived without complaint. Hollingsworth tried to speak, tried to redirect, but the room had shifted and no one was listening to him anymore. Thomas Fairweather cleared his throat. "The debt," he said. "The $43 originally owed by Miss Delaney's father. I have seen that ledger. I notarized the account myself 11 years ago." He looked at Hollingsworth, the look of a man who had been watching longer than anyone knew. "The original amount was $17, he said. "The rest was added later, in different ink, in different handwriting." The room absorbed this, the particular absorption of people realizing they had been lied to for a very long time. Cecilia looked at Hollingsworth. He was not a monster. She could see that now. He was a man who had built his power on paper and discovered too late that paper could be read by anyone who knew how. She did not want him destroyed, did not want him humiliated, did not want revenge. She wanted to go home. The original debt, she said, $17. I will pay it. By spring. In full. She folded the forged document, set it on the table, walked back through the crowd. No one stopped her. No one asked questions. The room was still processing what it had learned. Clement was waiting by the door, his hat in his hands. She walked past him, out into the cold. The stars were bright overhead. He followed. They stood in the dark outside the Grange Hall. Inside, she could hear voices, the particular sound of a community deciding what to do next. She did not need to hear it, did not need to know how it ended. Hollingsworth would not be punished, would not be driven out. He would simply become someone the valley no longer trusted. Someone whose word carried no weight. Someone who would spend the rest of his years behind a counter that fewer and fewer people visited. That was enough. Clement stood beside her, not touching, just present. You did not need me, he said. No, she said, I did not. The wind moved through the bare trees, cold and steady. But I wanted you there, she said. That is different. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper. The deed to the south pasture, he said. I had it drawn up last week. Both names on it now. She looked at the paper, at his handwriting on the witness line. You did not ask me, she said. No, he said, I did not. The stars wheeled overhead. The cold settled around them like a blanket. She took the paper, folded it into her pocket. Another small thing she noticed, the weight of it, light as nothing, heavy as the rest of her life. Spring came slow to Sweetwater Bend. The snow pulled back in patches. The creek ran high. And one morning in late March, Cecilia walked out to find the well pipe running clear and steady for the first time since she had arrived. She stood there for a long moment, watching the water rise. Clement found her there. He had been working the south fence since dawn. His boots were muddy. His sleeves rolled despite the chill. He did not speak, just stood beside her, looking at the water. The cow grazed in the pasture behind the barn. The same bony Jersey with the cracked horn. Fatter now, content. Cecilia had offered that cow for a corner indoors, had expected to be turned away, had expected nothing except the particular cruelty that the world reserved for women without leverage. Instead, she had found this, a house that had become hers, a name beside his on a deed, a life built from small acts of trust, accumulated over months, stacked like cordwood against the cold. She reached down, cupped water in her hands, let it run through her fingers. Clement watched her, that same steady patience he carried into everything. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something small, set it on the edge of the well without ceremony. A key, iron, old. The same key that opened the front door of the house she had been living in since November. She looked at it, at him. Keep the cow, he said. Keep the house. The same words, different now, a circle closing. She picked up the key, felt its weight in her palm. The spring sun was warm on her face. The water ran clear. And somewhere in the valley below, a bell was ringing, the bell he had paid for without putting his name to it. The bell that called people home. She closed her fingers around the iron. When I think about these two, what stays with me is not the grand gesture or the moment of vindication. It is the woodpile, the way it grew each morning without fanfare, the way he gave without asking for recognition, and she received without having to prove she deserved it. That is the rarest thing, I think, to be cared for simply because someone chose to care, not because you earned it, not because you asked, just because they saw you standing in the cold and decided you should not have to stand there alone. If this story stayed with you, tell me where you are listening from and what moment touched you most. I will be in the comments. If you would like more quiet evenings by the fire, lonely roads, quiet cowboys, and hearts finding their way home, subscribe and come back for the next one. Thank you for staying to the very end. I will see you in the next one.